So.
Okay, so the paper we're doing is about how there's an ice volcano, which is a volcano that erupts different liquids such as methane. There's methane liquid, just H2O, like normal volcanoes
That's
don't do.
interesting.
This happens because of high pressure under the surface that forces it up through cracks on the surface, shoots it up as if it was a volcano.
Really? That's fascinating.
Where is this?
Pluto.
Really?
Is
The dwarf planet?
No,
Yeah,
it's a
it's on-
planet.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
Alright.
So that's not Pluto. It happens in moons too. It's like
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty, very cool. Let's
Yeah.
find out about this.
Yeah.
So, Cuyler, how did you connect a random increase of ammonia on Pluto's surface to an ice volcano eruption?
Are you recording?
Yes.
Oh.
Get out of our
So, so where we actually using the again, recent shit. Doesn't matter. What's going on?
He's working on it.
Yeah.
He'll find out
Okay.
about what I asked him.
Yep. So, with the recent pictures taken by the New Horizons spacecraft toward Pluto,
Yes.
we have some clear pictures of the actual
Let's see them.
Pluto. Not that. That's not that.
Not that
Here,
picture.
it's not. Oop.
Oh, you almost had it.
So
There
we
it
actually
is.
have pictures of the volcano, and you'll actually see the white part in the middle of the volcano, and that's going to be the ammonia
Really?
and H2O. So basically, the effect that ammonia has on liquid water on Pluto is that it drastically decreases the freezing point of water, so it makes the flowing of water a lot easier on the extremely cold rock.
Really? That's fascinating.
So, Cuyler, is it possible for high levels of ammonia to appear in the area or in the mountain without an eruption?
Would you say it's entirely possible?
Entirely.
It's entirely possible that ammonia can appear, but with the excess evidence we have to show that it is a volcano, such as
That's a lot of
pictures we have, so I just say that it's more than entirely possible that it's just from the eruption.
Really?
More than you mean likely.
Yes.
Wow.
Very likely.
If Pluto really had flowing liquid water, how long ago would you hypothesize?
Word. Well, it could have flowing liquid water right now under the surface of Pluto.
Wow.
But on the surface of Pluto, if we're looking at pictures of Pluto with flowing water, really flowing water marks on Pluto, it's not really water. If we find any liquid, it's going to be nitrogen or methane flows.
Really?
So a lot of the
So what
liquid
we
damage-
perceive to be water is actually this nitrogen.
Not on the volcano though.
No.
Normally the effects of water erosion on Pluto are just from methane or nitrogen.
Oh.
So it's not water erosion.
It's not water erosion, but there's
Like
liquid
to see
erosion.
it.
That's our perception.
Okay.
For the people at home.
The common man.
Interesting.
What kind of geographical movements or events would have to occur for an event like this to happen?
It's extremely similar to what we're going to find on Earth with just the movement of tectonic plates.
Well, why don't you explain that to us?
So, right here, so the ejection of the actual fluid to the surface comes from fractures or cracks on the surface.
Oh, really?
Where high pressure in the area of liquid, extremely high pressure under the surface. So the moment it finds a crack, it just bursts straight up into what seems to be a volcano. Very similar to what you'll find on Earth with magma flow bursting up. We have Lucas here being a AP biologist.
Are you sure
Really?
about that?
We have a lot of AP biologists in this
biologist.
room.
Yeah, I think it's a 100% biologist.
Ratio.
in that room at the third moment in time.
Fascinating.
Yeah, truly fascinating.
Now, Cuyler,
Yeah.
I have a more personal question for you.
Yeah.
Do you watch the Joe Rogan podcast on a daily basis?
I'm gonna have to say I can't because he doesn't post on a daily
He
basis.
does not post on a daily basis, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Rogan, a powerful JRE on YouTube, posts 2 episodes a day at 3 a.m. Fact.
But not a
Ne-
day. More
Okay.
like
once every
days.
like 3 days.
Now let's go to get to a question.
Let's get back on track.
Yes.
But that was on track.
You're fair.
Back on the flip side.
In your paper, that's not your paper, but in the article, remnants of water flow from the eruption have we seen any other water flow on the dwarf planet that's a planet, but
Yeah,
not?
we just talked about this with the methane and nitrogen.
Then
so I
why'd
guess
you write it?
these two questions kind of mixed
They
together.
they intertwined
So,
because
yeah,
of
intertwined
the.
very well. So we can just.
It's a very
with
natural
it's just the
conversation.
nitrogen.
Very
So
natural.
if we want to
Methane
go
flows
to
that
a new
use-
topic, I would ask Cuyler. If we see that Pluto ejected liquid water, we could see this. We could infer that we may have flowing liquid water under the surface of Pluto.
We already
discussed
Yeah,
this.
Wasn't
but
a
it's very
topic.
likely to get having an excess amount of flowing water under Pluto. Could easily be huge oceans under there.
Fascinating.
Good job, Luke, for going on a completely different.
We have
topic.
answered 3 questions in 1, actually.
Wow.
And perhaps if we look at this next question written down here, maybe we will answer a 4th.
No, we aren't. If the water we find in the solar system ultimately arrived from a planet similar or the same source, that could it be possible that we find non-solar energy dependent life, such as the ones we find deep in the ocean on Pluto?
Well, it's entirely possible that that's true.
Is that going to be your answer to every question?
Because what
Well,
we see on Earth
Well,
is
it's
once you
entirely
get into an extreme deep area of the ocean with extremely high pressure, which is almost the exact conditions you would find on Pluto, except excessively polar and a lot more ammonia in the water, we see that down in the ocean, there's basically they take their energy not from the sun energy, which before we thought that all life got their energy from the sun. But no, the energy at the bottom of the ocean is taking it from chemical vents that release large amount of chemicals, black smoke, and there's different animals that can take the black smoke and turn it into energy, and then being a primary.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Are there other examples of this ice volcano in our solar system, or is this event unique to Pluto?
It's not really unique to Pluto. You
No.
can find it on a lot of moons because it's really just high water pressure being forced up through the surface. It's not that rare at
Do
all.
you think? This is more personal now and a more opinionated question.
Okay.
Do you think that this liquid pressure could be matched on another type of planet? We've seen it on moons and dwarf planets, as you've said.
I think that if you look at an example like Titan, which is also a planet that is surrounded by ice,
Yes.
and not a planet, it's a moon, but with water underneath, it has a very similar situation that we see on Pluto. So it's extremely. I haven't looked into ice
into it,
eruptions,
but you would
Titan,
think,
but I would,
based on principle, that it's
yeah,
likely.
I would assume that it's very similar,
Interesting.
especially since it's chilling around Jupiter.
So, Cuyler, are you doing any more research based on the New Horizons spacecraft Pluto photos?
It's classified information. It's
But you're part of
entirely-
the government.
it's entirely
I would hope
possible
so.
that it will be
He's
unclassified.
part of the government. He can't give you classified information.
That's what I'm
Well, we
saying.
can if we're
Lucas
on
is
this
the
podcast.
He's the
Lucas is
It's
the
FBI
Off
approved.
the record.
Yeah,
off the government.
it's off the record.
You didn't see this.
now. I have one last question to ask you.
Awesome.
So, does Charon share the ice volcano trait?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a lot of water on Charon, which is the largest moon of Pluto.
Wow.
Who could have known?
Who could have known? I sure
None,
didn't
almost like there's a
know.
graph there.
Wow.
Wow. Show
Very
this to the fans.
convenient. Show this for the fans. Sharon is right here.
Yeah, along
There
with
it
4
is.
other satellites.
Wow.
Mind blown.
that
Satellite
chill around-
moons, yes.
Satellite moons.
Now, that's very interesting. I'm impressed with the depth of your research.
Yeah, I'm impressed with the depth of
But I have something I researched as well.
Oh, really?
Beavers
Giant beavers.
that aren't actually beavers.
Giant beavers.
Bigger than Pluto?
Yes.
Perhaps.
It's entirely possible.
Let me show for the fans watching at home
It's not
an
even a
image,
beaver.
not a real image, but
really real.
now it is a cartoon
I actually took that image
rendition
myself of my
of a giant beaver. You will see here, this beaver, you can see the structure of the beaver
not a beaver.
and how it looks. Some would say it's not a beaver.
It's a rat with
But
teeth.
what questions do you guys have?
Well, how did you even come to study these giant beavers?
You know, I was browsing the web,
Really?
and I had found that there were these scientists investigating these wacky fossil remains that they found in Florida, Alaska.
Florida, here in the United States.
Yes, and
Wow.
even Alaska,
That's not
another
the United-
state.
No,
Do
let's
you
say
think there's
Canada.
any? Do you think there's any like ancestors or predecessors, not ancestors, to the giant beaver?
To the giant beaver, I'm almost certain that there
What
must be.
would it be?
Must be. If the giant beaver were an ancestor to present-day animals, I would say that it would have to have split off into the branches of the modern-day beaver and the mongoose.
Wow, you really believe that the modern day beaver is related to the giant beaver we see extinct 10,000 years ago?
I would think so.
Wow.
But where do these giant beavers live? Would it be like places similar to where beavers live?
Where would they reside?
They would reside in the wetland and marsh area. They really want to get those aquatic but yet foresty environments, a mix of both, which is why they resided in the wetlands.
Well,
So,
how
like,
big do these beavers get, though?
These beavers would get around 5 feet tall standing upright, which would make them the largest rodent to ever live.
Wow, that sounds almost as big as a black bear.
Yes,
Wow, imagine a black bear-sized beaver
With a
just
beaver
building
tail.
huge
just
dams.
building huge dams.
That would be cool, but science is not like that.
No, it's not.
So how did this thing evolve from having a skinny rat tail to having the famous beaver tail?
Well, actually, in my research, I found that the beavers that had paddle tails actually did exist alongside these giant beavers.
Really?
They did, and giant beavers seemed to have a tail that were similar to muskrats. I made a mistake earlier. I said mongoose, but I meant muskrat.
They're the same thing.
I hope they are.
But what makes them different from beavers of today?
Well, a lot of what makes them different has to be the lifestyle. Another thing is, apart from the actual biology of their tail and teeth being different, the
How are
actual
their teeth
lifestyle is different. Their teeth are they're a lot more curved, and the sharp point that beavers have on their teeth, they don't have. They don't have a sharp cutting edge, and that's because of the food they eat in the wetlands.
Really? What do they eat?
They eat aquatic plants found in the marsh
so
and river areas.
do they not deal with trees like normally?
No, it was it was looked into in the experiments and study of the fossil, but initially we would think, oh, maybe because of this curvature of the teeth, maybe they were doing something with trees, taking branches off, cutting them down. But it turns out, no, they're just going for
So
those
they couldn't
plants.
build dams.
No, they
They
can't build dams.
Wow.
No.
So this isn't a beaver. This is just like a big hairy dude.
Yes.
I
They
see.
they wouldn't build dams at all. They couldn't.
So where do they live?
They would just roam about the marshland. They wouldn't really reside in natural lodging necessarily, but they would just go around in almost, not necessarily packs, but their families and their colonies
Now-
of sorts would go about.
I noticed that you said that the giant beaver went extinct about 10,000 years
Yes.
ago, and I
Rest in
understand
peace.
that coincides around the end of the Younger Dryas period and the Ice Age that we
Yes.
experienced back then.
Yes,
so
true.
does that have any correlation? How did climate change affect the beaver's lifestyle?
The lifestyle of the beavers, the giant beavers to be specific, was impacted very heavily by climate change in the latter half of the Ice Age. Climate change would actually dry out the wetlands because towards the end of the Ice Age, the global temperature would rise. So this would create a lack of food for the population.
I see. Could it also be possible that due to an excessive amount of flooding that occurred in the United States toward the end of the Ice Age, as ice caps started to melt, most of the upper United States was covered in ice. Could it be that a lot of them were driven out of the upper United States into the lower United States where we find a lot of the fossils?
You know, it's entirely possible. It is entirely possible that that is the case. I think it likely is. The only reason I would say not is because there are a lot of fossils centered in the very northernmost parts of North America and Alaska. But the giant beaver fossils that we see in Florida, that's likely the case.
So would
They
you
were
say
driven out of the-
that's the same reason why many large animals died out?
I would think so. I think
Yes.
the climate change would
Wipe out
it
the
would wipe out a
megafauna.
lot of the large mammalia that were existing at the time, because their large bodies were no longer able to sustain themselves in the environments they found themselves in.
So, like, what role did this beaver play in the environment?
The giant beaver was such a glimmer in the
Of hope?
of prowess in the ecological community. It would be a landmark species because it had the title as, like I said earlier, the largest rodent to ever exist.
That's pretty large.
And the lifestyle would be very peculiar, yet very
Intriguing.
I would say understandable. It would be very peculiar at a first glance because you think, oh, it's a beaver, it builds dams, it has the teeth, all of that. However, no, the lifestyle when contrasted with the modern day beaver and beavers with padded tails living back then is actually very different.
Well, thank you, Couto.
You're welcome.
I think that wraps up the podcast.
Thank you for your time spent
Thank
here.
you for your
with
time, Kyle.
Couto, and
Thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
I know
Thank you.
we didn't
Thank you, Ian.
get to get to your
We didn't get to
article. Would you
Ian's
like to go
article.
over a slight brief explanation of what you read about?
I'm sorry, but we're all out of time.
We're all out of time.
Well, it was nice seeing you guys for the
For the
first
AP
edition
Bio
of the Luke Couto
experience.
podcast.
Now we're getting a 360 angle.
Yeah.
Have a
Louis'
great
voice.
day.
All right. Go. All right.
Welcome to the second part of our AP Biology podcast episode. We are back again with the first three. Lucas Costa is yelling, and we are going to get to Ian's article. Ian, what did you research? What, dude?
Look at this Chromebook.
I'm looking
It
at
looks
it.
dope.
You're interviewing our podcast.
It's very new, that's why.
Yes.
Welcome to our
Welcome to
video.
the podcast.
Welcome to our video. Yeah.
I interrupted another one.
Welcome.
Now,
Thank you for
like I was saying,
Let's move on.
let's move on to Ian McCann's article. Ian,
My
take it
article
away.
was about an extinct species of bird coming back.
Oh, so another ancient
Really?
species.
Kind of, but not really.
I see. What kind of bird was it?
It was a bird.
It was a bird. Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic.
How is it possible that an extinct species could possibly come back like that?
Well, the situation is the environment allowed it. A certain something of the environment, like the certain conditions of the environment, like were so favorable to certain traits that over time
that they just came back naturally,
Yes.
perhaps? Very interesting.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting. Do you think something similar to this could occur again?
Yes.
Yes.
As you can see with sticklebacks from the video we
Yep.
watched, link in the description.
Link in the description.
Well, where did this occur?
Like the birds.
Yeah.
The island of Aldoraba in the Indian Ocean.
Well, what makes that so special?
Well, there are no predators on the island.
Really?
And very little shrubbery, so they don't really need to be able to fly, which is what makes them special.
If it happened once, it should happen more often, right?
Yeah, but you need really specific environments, traits and conditions are able for this to happen, so it's a pretty rare occurrence.
So, what is this bird called?
It is called the white-throated rail.
So, how can you tell white-throated rails are the same species? How can you tell that they've come back?
Good question, Luke Couto. You can tell by looking at the anatomy and bone structure.
Always reliable.
Always.
Now, you've been talking about this evolution of this bird coming back into the community, the ecological community. Is there any other types of evolution, perhaps, that could exist that could impact this
What
bird?
kind of evolution is this?
What kind of evolution is this?
Iterative evolution.
What makes
What
this so
is
special?
iterative evolution?
Well, it's the repeated evolution of a species from the same ancestor at different times in history, but
Wow.
but still having basically the same outcome.
So why? There's something I'm not understanding here about this whole thing. Why did the bird become
They
flightless?
had no predators, so they didn't need to
so
fly.
that's why they're still
No
on the
predators.
Well, the first time they
Wow.
got wiped out because the island got flooded. But when
Flooded.
when the same ancestors came back, they became wingless. Not wingless, but they couldn't fly again.
Ian, fun fact for the fans at home.
Well, how long ago did this happen? How long ago did this happen?
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Yo, on the same page. Okay. 136,000 years.
1,000. That's a long time. Very long
where
time.
these birds are found in the
Well, I already
island,
said that,
correct?
Cuyler. So,
Yeah.
but Aldabra Island in the Indian Ocean, it's off the coast of Madagascar.
Was it a recent study that showed that someone just discovered some bones and just put it together that at one point they went extinct and re-evolved? Interesting.
Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that was very interesting.
That was a very interesting discussion we have. I bet Cuyler was about to say that. This has been part 2 of the AP Biology article podcast, starring myself, Luke Couto, John Cuyler Mathieu, and Ian Antonio Gomes McCann. Thank you for watching.
The school and my middle name wrong.
Of which there two engendered is the floor. One zephyr is ape with a sweet operetta. We are back with the AP Bio podcast.
Here you go.
She did a study with.
It's Yang Gang 2020.
Back again,
Andrew
Yang Gang
Yang.
2020, Andrew Yang.
You guys should look at his
best president of
policies.
Canada. Look at his
Pretty
policies.
good.
Pretty dope.
Yeah, they had
Pretty great.
Let's look it up. Let's see what Andrew Yang.
Let's see. Let's go back. I actually have his policies open right here.
Already has them.
Already have them.
You want to go over some
There we
key,
are.
key
Key policies. I was reading just the third column
I see.
right now, and let me see another policy. So he wants to implement mandatory paid leave policy. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's a good idea.
I do too.
I
I think there's
that's
a lot
alright.
of people that kind of get fucked over when they
Have to leave for like.
yeah, they have to leave. Like my mom actually lost a promotion because she had to
Really?
use paid leave for my older brother. Yeah,
That's a shame.
yeah, it is.
Especially for women because they have to have babies and they have to.
Yeah, it's a fact, and they need a lot more time off.
need a lot
more
In
time
my
off.
mom's case, she actually it was fine because the bank got karma because like a year later the bank goes down.
Wow.
So she was okay in that karma.
Next, we have easing the transition to self-driving vehicles.
I don't know how I feel
Now,
about
I like this
I think
for a few reasons. Being someone who has been inside of a Tesla and knowing how effective and efficient these cars can be, I think they're a positive good for the future of America. However, the problem that I'm seeing now is millions of jobs will be lost if we have to implement these self-driving cars. So I think easing the transition is definitely something that needs to be worked on, because if this just happens like that, because it's already happening in a sense. But if this just one day goes through like that and then that's over and millions of jobs are displaced, that's going to be a killer for our economy.
earlier in the year, during December this year, I actually or last year I guess
Technically.
I got hit by somebody who was texting and driving.
Really?
Totaled the car. So self-driving cars, I think in that regard, is a great
It's a
idea.
great
idea.
But I think if we were to transition over to self-driving cars, starting a residential idea would be a lot better than just
I also-
going into the business
commercial
commercial aspect of it.
I mean, I also feel
agree.
like that it's the type of thing where like we're not at the point yet where we're ready
Perhaps,
for them.
perhaps.
Yeah.
So I think we should give it a little more time.
Yeah, especially with the huge gas and oil industries, it's definitely going to be difficult to convince them to not make actions to stop such self-driving car and electric car advances. I think that Andrew Yang actually has a policy regarding bigger corporations.
He does.
And how capitalism should be on a smaller scale.
We're
I'm gonna talk about that
we're
one.
gonna bust those corporations.
There's one I would like to go over real quick. I think particular interest to Luke. NCAA should pay athletes. I believe this 100%.
Let me see this. Let me detail what Andrew Yang says. So Andrew Yang's website says, and I quote, "Star student athletes are told they should be grateful that they are receiving a free education. Meanwhile, schools generate tons of millions in revenue and corporate sponsorship, and coaches and athletic advisors are paid multiple millions of dollars because of their athletic exploits. The NCAA should accept the reality that certain of its sports become entertainment properties, and the athlete should be compensated accordingly. This is particularly true for Division I men's football and men's basketball. We should create a new type of college athlete, and I quote, performer athlete, who is entitled to market-based compensation. This would not affect the status of any other student athletes, nor the tax-exempt status of the university. However, each university with a performer athlete would be required to start an affiliated, taxable for-profit entity, through which both corporate sponsorships and performer athlete salaries would flow." Paying athletes in certain sports would lead to more resources going to the players who are both the main attraction and putting their bodies on the line each game. I love this. I agree with this. I'm a big fan of football, particularly college football. Everybody loves college football. That enjoys football, that is.
Except people getting thieved from it and actually playing.
Exactly. Except people playing the sport that are getting robbed.
Exactly.
I think it's
And Andrew Yang's gonna fix that.
I think it's dumb that students don't get paid for playing.
It's a
and
shame.
They make millions, like coaches like make millions of dollars, and they make nothing.
Ridiculous.
So it's like it's taking time they could use for like jobs and stuff to make money.
We have. Let's see. Let's have some more discussion here.
From what I remember, there was also a policy about prescription drugs and controlling the cost of prescription drugs. Which
That's
applies
true.
to you.
Applies to me in particular. Having an EpiPen is great because if I were to die or come close to it, if I were to get in a near-death situation
If I
with
could pause you for a
peanut
second,
butter,
we're talking about his peanut butter
yes,
allergy.
if I were to come in contact with this substance known as peanut butter, very popular, I would die,
Very delicious.
right? So having an EpiPen would save me from that. However, the cost of this is going through the roof, so I can't even afford the primary EpiPen. I have the cheaper, more cost-effective ones, which are fine, but I would much prefer to go back to the old ways of having an EpiPen when EpiPens were a lot more affordable for the common man, especially with how many allergies are out there.
Here's a really interesting one I would like to talk about: 18-year term limit for Supreme Court justices.
I think that's really interesting.
I think
it's
that's
going to bring more people into more eligible people into the Supreme Court because there's a lot of people that are unwilling to dedicate their lives to it, and I think the idea that you will have time afterwards to pursue other things or maybe even just retire is going to be a lot more beneficial
I
and
also
promising
think
to
that
people
it
who
just makes a lot more sense because if you're appointed a life term, that's a big thing.
it's a slavery.
Yeah, and like you're gonna be stuck there. Like even if like policies like generations change, you're still gonna be stuck there.
Yeah.
And like you might not represent the people of the time.
I wonder how it's going to affect people who have already spent 18 years in the Supreme Court.
And then also
Precisely,
something
but
really
they
interesting to
get out of
notice. Something really interesting to know is that most of the time Supreme Court's justices just die and they get
Yes,
replaced.
and they get replaced.
And that's typically like random when they die.
Yes.
But if we had every 18 years, it would be much more
It'd be a
scheduled.
much more scheduled,
Yeah,
much more
exactly.
smooth transition of power.
Yeah, I'm reading right here that Clarence Thomas has been in for 27 years. So I don't know how it would affect him being. Would he be immediately let off, or would they give
Or
him?
would they give him
I feel like
or would they
every
give him 18 years?
I feel like that'd be the thing where they just let him go until he's dead because he's not going to last another 18 years.
Yeah. Or maybe just give him 18 years or until he's dead. That's probably how it's gonna go. I don't know.
Another interesting one I saw was making it legal to vote at 16, which I think personally is a good idea.
See,
I don't at all. I think that a lot of people don't understand what they really believe at the age of 16. That they you're extremely gullible, and even now we're like,
I still
I'm
think
18 and I'm still extremely gullible.
I still
so.
think at 16 you have like a general sense of like.
And there's a lot of people that their opinions are based on their parents,
Exactly.
just the opposite of their parents. And I feel like
And I
that
feel
would
like that-
that being a deciding factor. I feel like you should be an adult. Like an adult.
Like a legal adult.
Children voting just doesn't seem right in my mind. Because if we're gonna start lowering it now, just imagine the effects of people wanting to lower it in the future. Because if you're gonna be sick, if we lower it to 16 now, and 20 years from now they might want to lower it to 12.
Yeah.
And I sure as hell do not want a 12-year-old voting for anyone. And here's another one, just an interesting one. The penny makes no sense. That's the name of the policy.
I agree.
I agree
And
with that.
pennies actually make 2 cents to produce, so that's a
So
50%.
it's a waste of money.
Yeah, it's just a waste of money to have them. And who actually uses pennies? Like your grandma?
Nobody.
That's it. It's the only person that's using
Nobody.
I mean, just,
Yes.
You're doing a regular podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We're talking about
the
Andrew
policies of
Yang.
Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang, presidential candidate for the 2020 election. We're on his website right now, checking it
Yeah,
out.
we're just discussing the policy.
I mean, also like everyone throws away pennies. Like no one cares about them.
Yeah, no, like I always
More
put them
money
in the tip
goes
jar,
down
just
the
like most of the people.
But
like,
you know
hey,
what
it's
would
for the
be
pennies.
a negative effect of getting rid of the penny? We would no longer have the phrase penny pincher.
That's a fact. It's gonna have to be a nickel pincher.
I think
And
I
that's
like
gonna
that more.
very easily become a nipple pincher.
Yeah. And no one's gonna want to be saying that.
Oh, I'm
Big
reading.
Washington D.C. estate. I think
I disagree.
I agree.
I think that there's some. I don't like the idea of having a 51-star flag, and actually, he wants to make a Puerto Rico estate. So
Well, I mean,
52
52
is
would
not
be a
I
better
think both
number.
would be a good idea.
But
I
I feel
think-
like if we do that, then there's going to be a lot more grounds to change the law specifically for government bodies inside the Washington D.C. state, and I feel like that's just opening the door for corruption later on.
Well, I just think it's kind of silly that D.C. is a state. Like,
I don't see
it's
why.
more.
I
It's a
think.
bigger population than like Wyoming.
That,
and a few
well,
other
the
states.
thing is, though, I think DC is supposed to be designated as the District of Columbia, as the government district, where it is not a state. I think that distinction is important. So I don't see why, because there's no real. It is in practice effectively a state, right?
Yeah,
they
like
don't,
when I
they
think
don't
of Washington D.C., I don't think
but
of
they don't
They
Maryland.
don't live
But
different.
they don't get any senators or anything. They don't get the same representation in government. That's the thing.
I
And
suppose so.
I don't think that's fair to the people.
And with Puerto Rico, I know that both of you know a Puerto Rican because
We all know.
Nick Ortiz, who his opinion, he's lived in Puerto Rico his whole life, besides like a few months here. He very much wants Puerto Rico to become the United
And I
States
think
state.
it very much deserves it.
What I had talked about him with was that he thinks that the benefits of becoming a state are way higher than that of territory. And a lot of people in Puerto Rico who don't want to
agree.
become a state are just like, oh, we're our own country, we're way cooler. But really, like, the amount of, like, the country would be way better. And,
Yeah.
Yeah,
if
because
it
we
were a
could
state.
give them money. It's easier to support them.
Yeah. I'm looking right here, and I see that one of his policies, where was it? Nuclear energy. So I'm going to click on that and see what that's about. Which is interesting, moving on to nuclear energy instead of what we have now, which is... What? Nuclear energy. My bad. Nuclear energy is a relatively low impact on generating electricity, and yeah, I think that's awesome because we have so much money invested inside the industries like oil and gas and all that jazz. I think that moving on to nuclear energy, because we see with the giant like aircraft carriers that our military uses, they can, without stopping, go for 25 years on their nuclear powered engines, which is extraordinary. If you can power that big, it's a floating city. If you can power that for 25 years, I have a feeling that if we can move on to a safer nuclear energy, it'll be a lot better for everyone involved. That we can get rid of all like the bad stuff that's going on. Because I feel
agree.
like the amount of harm that people fear with nuclear energy is probably trumped by that of the amount of horrible stuff that goes on in the current energy.
Also looking at rebuilding American infrastructure, I think that's a really good idea. On the coast, it's not really a big thing because a lot of money there. But like in the Midwest, South, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think putting money there is a good idea.
Yeah. I see here it says regulate AI and other emerging technologies, which I think is super important. Elon Musk, who's a lot smarter than any of us, thinks that the end of the world is coming very soon in the form of advanced or artificial intelligence. So I think that, it says right here, if experts such as Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk are to be believed, destroy humanity, and that's just about the prior sentence that I just moved. So I feel like that's one of the most important things we can focus on, especially like he also talked about climate change, and we all know about his the freedom dividend. They have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you guys don't know what the freedom dividend is, it's basically everyone gets a minimum over the age of 18. Everyone gets a
$1,000 a
minimum
month.
of $1,000 a month. If you're already making over $1,000 a month,
You don't
won't
get
anything.
nothing.
If you're making $900 a month, you'll get
You get
$100. But if you're not making anything, you'll get a
$1,000
and that's just for
a
living
month.
expenses like rent, food.
Precisely.
I think it's a good idea. I would just think maybe a little more is needed for rent and food. I don't think
I
it's
don't think so.
I don't think it's
500 a month for rent is like that's a good place.
But like food and stuff.
Food,
It's just like
500
a
But
minimum-
thinking about how many people this will
let's
have
divide
to...
it into days. So that's about 30 days in a month. So let's do 500 divided by 30. which is $16 a day.
For food.
It's not that much.
Yeah, and then plus you have to add in healthcare and stuff.
That's true, but people...
So like that's like not enough to live on.
Yeah, I think that you say that now, but I feel like putting this money through the economy and really getting the economy pumping will help prices go down. And I feel like we're at, probably right now, in my opinion, we're going to be at the highest amount of inflation and probably population. I believe that the population is going to start going down from here on out.
I don't think it's gonna start going down.
In America, anyway.
No, I know. I don't think it's gonna go down yet because of immigration. That's the thing.
Fact, and he actually has some pretty right-leaning beliefs on immigration, which I think is better. I feel like Andrew Yang as a presidential candidate would only be possible after the election of Donald Trump because with such high levels of just extreme views, having a more moderate person in office who can really think of things objectively and look at both sides for what they have to offer can help the country a lot more than someone who's just going to try to just get rid of everything the last president did.
I agree.
Like Donald Trump would do or Hillary Clinton would do if she somehow got to 2024 or 2020.
There's no way that's happening. The Democrats
Kanye.
made a mistake. And as a Democrat, as a left-wing Democrat, I think it's important to get a moderate. I like Joe Biden, but I don't know anymore because of the sexual assault stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see, and I know that
And I don't know what to do with it.
no offense to my boy Andrew Yang, but I doubt he could sexually assault anybody. He's my baby.
He's just a baby
He's
face.
a baby face.
He's just
Baby
a
face
child.
Yang
He's not gonna do nothing.
Just look at this man. Does that
Look
man?
at him. Does that man?
That's such a great president.
Such a great president. He's your friend.
He's your friend.
He's
your
a
friend.
homie.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for today.
Awesome sauce.
Awesome sauce. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for listening to our podcast about Andrew Yang.